All right, welcome. Thank you so much for coming to the first in-person Louisiana Legislative Day since 2019. I'm Justin Fenske, your host. I think I know everybody at this point. So thank you for coming. What you have in your hand is the agenda for today. We did have a small change when we planned this out back in the fall. We tried to do our best to understand what would be happening on a legislative day today in May, when they tend to publish their schedule a few days in advance. So we have a change in that we will not be going over to the legislature today because there are no sessions for either the Senate or House this afternoon. They all ended up happening this morning. So we will take that into consideration and maybe switch up how we're going to do it next year so that that will be available. So I apologize about that, but it's hard to plan in that far in advance. In your hand, you also have a number of bills that are there. We sent these out as well. So you just have a quick blurb that frankly I wrote. So it's, take it with a grain of salt as to how accurate it is. I did my best to copy things from the bill to make sure it was clear. But if you go into the Google Doc, or the PDF, you can click and it'll take you directly to the actual bill so you can read it yourself. There are some that NACAC has commented on, so you can see what NACAC's stance are. Opposed for all of the ones that they did comment. There were some that they were neutral on, and then a number that they just simply did not comment on because they didn't fall within specifically what NACAC is looking at and some of what Jade will be talking about. But I thought they might be interesting to you, so we still left them in case they were of interest. So, Brian, anything else to add for the order of the day?
So we'll be starting off as at 101. And so we have Jade, who is pretty much kind of like our SAC Act boss, so to speak. Yes, Jade, I called you my boss. Good. She cannot hear us right now. That's a good thing. But she's kind of like my SAC Act boss. I'm the co-chairperson for Louisiana, and she's one of the co-chairpersons for the entire of SAC. So we're definitely happy to have her here today. For those of you that are a bit maybe novice about what advocacy for what these looks like, especially as it relates to our politics here in the state of Louisiana and at large in general around the United States. Jade will definitely be able to help give some context as far as how we can do it, and we're already doing it, how we can do it better. And then following that, we are going to have some good folks come and speak to you and answer questions about things that you may wonder about in reference to how the government and how things in Louisiana operate for education, and how that correlates down to our side, whether you be on the college side of the desk or on the high school side of the desk. And then following that, of course, we got lunch for you all, so you'll be able to relish in that. And we definitely encourage you to speak to one another, get to know where each other is from, what each other does, or what you do. And also tap into what you may have done for SAC Act and how long you've been in SAC Act. And for those of you that might be a bit younger in SAC Act, understand what more of a role you can take in it if you would like to, and see how we can be a better state in correlation with our government here in Louisiana. So I believe that's the piece I memorized and covered all this. But yeah, so Jade, are you ready?
Can you hear us yet? No.
All right, Jade, are you ready? Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
y'all ready for me?
Yep. All right.
Okay,
go ahead and
awesome.
begin.
Give me a second to share my screen.
Brian, something's happening. If you're on, that's okay. Now can you hear us, Jade? I did. It's something with yours because as soon as you hit it, I'll
Got you. Jade, go ahead and start.
But we can't hear her either. Oh, can we? I did.
Okay, am I good to go? Sorry, I thought I heard Justin still talking. Okay, awesome. Hi y'all. Okay, perfect. Hi y'all. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. My name is Jade Domain. I am on the board of directors for the Southern Association for College Admission Counseling, or SACAC. And I specifically oversee the Government Relations Committee. So essentially, me and my co-chair Kelly oversee all 9 SACAC states and their advocacy efforts. So that sometimes looks like legislative days. I'll talk a little bit about some different kind of programming that we put on, but I'm really kind of here to represent SACAC and to kind of talk a little bit about how we get involved in advocacy work. Something I do want to mention is that I'm from Louisiana. So I actually grew up in New Orleans. I went to Cabrini High School. I graduated from Loyola University, New Orleans. So very, very proud New Orleanian. I have a house in New Orleans that I purchased a couple of years ago. So New Orleans is still very near and dear to my heart. So when we kind of were dividing up the states, I was very much like, I need Louisiana to be one of my states because I care deeply about policy happening in the state. I currently live in Atlanta, and that's really where a lot of my advocacy work got started. So I've gotten really involved through SACAC with kind of different Georgia advocacy efforts. But I would say that, you know, my education and kind of why I'm passionate about people having access to education really started at home in New Orleans. One other thing I want to say before I kind of move on is a thank you to Bryan and Justin. Louisiana has not had a in-person government relations event since before the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the first in-person program in a while. Justin and Bryan are both new to the government relations committee, so they didn't even have like one person to kind of, you know, give that historical information. So they had to do a lot of digging and kind of prep for this, and I think they're setting a really solid foundation for kind of moving forward. So definitely want to say a thank you to Justin and Bryan for all of the work that they're doing. So I will say, I think when I kind of planned this presentation, I was planning it as though I was presenting specifically to SACAC members, but now I know that there's kind of a good mix of SACAC members and Board of Regents members. And so I kind of want to, I'm going to try my best to kind of open it up and kind of explain some of SACAC's work a little bit better too. But what I'm hoping to cover is our advocacy priorities. So the things that we as an organization really advocate for and find important in this work, why advocacy is important. So why it is important for constituents and legislators and stakeholders to really kind of build relationships and have conversations among one another. I'm going to talk a little bit about your role in advocacy as a constituent, as a SACAC member, what you can be doing, and really just kind of steps to getting started. So starting with the advocacy priorities, so SACAC kind of turns to NACAC, the National Association for College Admission Counseling. We take NACAC's lead in really kind of understanding our different priorities. So NACAC recently actually, for those of you who might have kind of been familiar with some of our programming in the past, NACAC has kind of adjusted the way that they talk about some of their advocacy issues. They've kind of changed some of those overall themes that they're talking about, but kind of the core of what they are speaking to, what we are speaking to is the same. It's still kind of those areas of higher education access. So it really kind of boils down to these 3 key issues or key priorities that whenever a policy comes up, NACAC kind of uses these priorities to see if it kind of matches, if that policy or if that bill matches these priorities when deciding if to support or not to support a bill. So one of our priorities is creating and sustaining student and equity-centered admission policies at colleges and universities. So when I think of this one, I'm thinking of kind of some of the national issues that are kind of related to this are the double Pell. So NACAC really supports increased financial aid, and one concrete kind of ask that has come up recently is doubling the Pell Grant. So that's kind of related to this one. Also, the DREAM Act is also kind of related to this one of kind of creating access for underrepresented, undocumented students in this case. Certainly kind of the pending Supreme Court decision on race-conscious admission. That's another kind of related item to this issue. And SACAC and NACAC certainly kind of support institutions using race-conscious admission to stand behind diversity and equity issues in their institutions. Maintaining and encouraging ethical practices in college admission counseling. So NACAC put out a best practices document around practices in terms of college admission counseling. I know it's likely that SACAC members are familiar with this document, but essentially it's been through a few iterations. It's recently become kind of the best practices, but it's essentially how we center we center that document in kind of advocating for different policies that are ethical in our processes. So that's another one. And then finally, advocating for school counselors and college advisors to support underserved students. When I think of this one, a big, I think it encapsulates a lot of what we do, but a big issue that I think of is kind of high student to counselor ratios. The American School Counseling Association recommends a 250 to 1 student to counselor ratio in order to really provide the level of guidance, mental health support, and of course, kind of college guidance that students might need. And at this time, very few states kind of abide by that 250 to 1. Most of our states are significantly above that. And so college counselors, or sorry, not college counselors, guidance counselors, school counselors are really kind of overworked and not able to kind of give the level of support that oftentimes that they would want to kind of supporting students with mental health issues, with their classes, with college access kind of guidance. So that's something that NACAC really kind of firmly stands behind. This year, there has been a lot of conversation around increasing mental health support. Specifically, President Biden and Vice President Harris had come out with a bill for increasing mental health support. And so that is something that that NACAC and SACAC certainly kind of supports. So those are the priorities themselves. I thought I'd talk a little bit about why it's like how advocacy can kind of help us further some of those priorities. And so an important thing to know is that legislators need us. I think building relationships is so key in kind of getting change to happen. A lot of us who work in whether we're college counselors or admission counselors, we know that we're often tasked to know a lot or a little about a lot, right? To kind of feel like we're experts on every institution, or if you're on the college side, every program at your institution. And I think in conversations with legislators, I've heard they're tasked with something very similar, right? Like they're not just making decisions about education, they have to kind of have an understanding of healthcare, about highways, about so many different things that kind of touch them. And oftentimes we'll rely on those of us who are kind of doing that groundwork, who are feeling the experiences, to really educate them on how these policies might impact their students. So legislators really do need us just as much as we need them in this process. Oftentimes they benefit from hearing our student stories. So a lot of the time, if the legislator is trying to get a bill passed or trying to kind of make change, they might ask for some testimonials from students, or from, I know I've been able to provide testimonials in Georgia for different kind of higher education access related issues. So our stories can really be a compelling piece of this process. And I'll talk about that a little bit more too. And finally, they need us to vote, right? So I think, I definitely see how when I walk into a legislator's office and I am able to tell them I'm one of their constituents, a lot of the time, like their face lights up and they're, excited to be able, because we are the people that they're truly serving, right? And so at the end of the day, like, our vote can really kind of make a difference in their kind of continuation and their roles. And so they rely on building relationships with their constituents and us voting for them and us, backing their votes and that kind of a thing. So it's important to know that at the end of the day, like this is a communal relationship, and legislators really do rely on us. And the reason I bring this up is I think it's really easy to kind of feel like, oh, like, I don't know much about policy. I can't really make change in this way. But at the end of the day, like we're, legislators are experts in the political process, and we are experts in the student experiences. And we kind of need each other to kind of make a difference. Some examples of ways that advocacy has led to change within SACAC specifically. In 2021, North Carolina, their Board of Governors was making a decision about extending their test optional admission policy statewide, and had kind of shared that was going to be a conversation that they were having one day. And literally, like, we sent out an email to North Carolina membership saying, hey, this is something that's literally being voted on tomorrow. We sent out like a draft email of something that they could send to their legislators, and the next day they decided to extend their test optional policy, but they specifically mentioned getting a lot of emails related to that specific policy. And while I can't say, like, I have no idea if it's that they had received all those emails from SACAC members or not, what I can say is it sounds like people kind of expressing what side they were on in the issue really made a difference in that case. Also in 2017, that was the year that I supported the Georgia's government relations program. There was a legislator who just SACAC had built a really strong relationship with because we'd been kind of meeting with her every single year. And she actually that year, after hearing us kind of talk about these issues so much, specifically around the student to counselor ratio, she'd wound up proposing an increased budget for school counselors in Georgia that year. And so it did not bring the ratio down to like where we would have wanted it to, but it still showed that, she'd heard us, she recognized our organization after repeated efforts and kind of, decided to call for something different. And so, I think that something important to know is that change can sometimes be slow. It's not this exciting, like, oh, I had a meeting, and so, tomorrow this bill came out or something like that. A lot of the time, a big piece of it is building relationships so that you're having kind of ongoing conversations. And again, that it's like this back and forth, that your legislators feel like they can call on you when they have questions or when they need some support or things like that, and vice versa. I also thought I'd share a little bit about, I thought it might help, especially in the vein of storytelling, to share a little bit about why I advocate. I talked a little bit earlier about how I just had such a positive experience in college, and certainly that's something that I want to see a lot of people have access to, and that's certainly why I kind of got into the work of being an admission counselor. My first year as an admission counselor, I worked at a public college in Georgia that essentially the top 3 most selective public colleges in Georgia were banned from admitting undocumented students. And at the same time, I was doing diversity recruitment for the institution that I was working for. So there was something really, really frustrating about kind of this institutional priority, but then this policy that kind of, kept me from being able to work with a population of students that would kind of influence that institutional priority. And certainly I really believe, and I think a lot of us do, and the value of diversity in classroom spaces and things like that, and how people with different life experiences are necessary for kind of influencing how we learn among each other. So that was a policy that really, as my colleague Ashley Young would say, burned my biscuits. And so I attended my first legislative day in Georgia when I was 22 years old, and I was terrified, and I walked into a legislator's office and I was kind of, by myself talking to her. And I really kind of spoke to this issue. And there were pieces about it that were challenging, but there were also pieces about it that were really empowering. And I think that what I ultimately took from that day was it is really nice. I think regardless of what institutions we're working for, there are probably things that we get frustrated with or things that we wish could change. But I think that there is something to be said about being able to kind of take off our institution caps and really represent SACAC and represent the bigger picture. And so this SACAC and advocacy work has really given me a space to be able to speak for things that I think really matter to me when I feel like sometimes I'm not able to make that change necessarily like at my specific institution. So that's a little bit about kind of my story in terms of why I advocate. And I share that because I want people to feel like, again, you don't have to be an expert. You can be completely new to this. You just have to have like the passion for that work. All right, so now I want to talk about the how, because I know that that's like the really important piece of it. Like, how do you start making a difference? How do you start doing this advocacy work? And I wanted to start through kind of what you're able to do, what we're able to kind of provide support-wise from SACAC. So thank you for attending again. Like, this is the legislative day. This is a really great way to kind of get involved and to learn and to start kind of, engaging in advocacy work. Typically, my goal and as being kind of overseeing the legislative or the government relations committee is that each state puts on some kind of a legislative day. And like I said, there is really power to returning every year and kind of, staying engaged in this work. So you've definitely kind of taken, one of these steps already. Another way that SACAC can support you is through educational programming. So in the past, I don't know if anyone attended last year, we had a NACAC representative actually Zoom in and give a presentation about all those NACAC pillars, but specifically through like a Louisiana lens. And I think that's always really helpful for those of you who are SACAC members. You can actually see that in the in your member portal. You can kind of go back and watch that webinar. That you might find that really kind of helpful in just learning about the different issues as they pertain to Louisiana. But those are programs we put on different webinars throughout the year. NACAC typically puts out newsletters, and sometimes we will essentially, and certainly if you're a NACAC member, you are getting those policy related newsletters, but we recognize that not all SACAC members are NACAC members, and so sometimes we try to at least like quarterly put out some kind of legislative update that especially as it pertains to our specific 9 states and the Caribbean. Action alerts, so these are really, really easy ways. You're gonna see I write action alerts a good bit on this presentation, but these are really simple ways to engage. Essentially, NACAC will sometimes send out some kind of action alert where they, they're like, this bill is going to be voted on soon. Show your legislators that you support it or that you don't support it. And it gives you a form letter, and you just have to type in like your name, your address so that they know who your legislators are and that kind of a thing. And it gets sent to your legislators. So that's a really kind of simple, like doesn't take a lot of time way to just show your legislator what side of an issue that you're on. I usually get, at least from my my national legislators, I usually get some kind of email response that's, it's definitely a like auto response, but it shares how that legislator feels about that issue. And so that's always really helpful for me. I can see if they're kind of on the same side or if they kind of disagree with it. So that's a really great way to a really simple way to get involved. And then calls to action. So like what I said, when North Carolina, like we emailed the North Carolina membership and we were like, hey, this is being voted on tomorrow. Please like share your support. That's a way that SACAC can kind of help you get involved. One other thing I wanted to say about action alerts, a lot of the time we get those from NACAC, but certainly it can come from the state level as well. So if there is an issue, like I think it's really hard. Again, I'm from Louisiana, so I do kind of pay a little bit more attention to Louisiana than some of my other states. But since I'm overseeing 9 states, sometimes it's really hard for me to know education-related policy that's happening on every single state, especially if something's urgent. So if there's something that you think that you've read about that you're like, hey, I think that we need some kind of action alert to go out, we can actually ask NACAC to create an action alert for us. So we don't have to kind of wait for their direction. We can do a lot of kind of state-initiated programming or state-initiated outreach as well. So definitely let us know if there's something that you want to put out there. And now I wanted to talk about some other ways to get involved. And these, so far I've talked a lot about kind of education and higher education access related policy, but something I want to kind of, I want you to keep in mind is these are steps that I would encourage you to think about regardless of what issues might, be important to you. So these are steps that you can take that are not necessarily specifically through SACAC. These are steps that you can take kind of beyond, some of them are steps that you can take kind of beyond education related policy. And I won't go over all of them for the sake of time, but some things that I would say is like follow your lawmakers and nonpartisan organizations on social media. I know that sign up for newsletters and things like that for organizations that are doing work that's related to kind of what you're interested in. I know that's a really great way that I kind of try to stay informed. If there's a petition out there for something that you care about, signing that petition. Those are some small, like quick, low commitment, indirect action steps. So if you probably know kind of what your comfort level is and what you have the capacity for in terms of time. And so the first kind of list of small steps are things that you can be doing that might not take too much of your time or might be a good like first step. Say you've already taken a few first steps. Say you're like, okay, I am really kind of trying to grow in my advocacy work. I want to do a little bit more, doing something like attending this event. So again, I think y'all are already taking a medium step. Thank you for being here. Volunteering with the Government Relations Committee. So I'm going to put a plug out there. I think Bryan and Justin have been doing a really great job. If anyone is interested in kind of supporting their efforts, maybe you're not ready to kind of take on the chair role, but you want to be really supportive. A lot of states are moving toward kind of a committee model where there are multiple volunteers supporting the state chairs and what they're doing. So there's always room to volunteer with the Government Relations Committee and SACAC. Definitely like attending some kind of an open forum in your community, emailing or calling your legislator. Again, that's a big part of kind of that relationship building piece. And then in terms of big steps, that might take more ongoing commitment, or if you're trying to kind of do a little bit more leadership in terms of advocacy, being a government relations chair. I don't think we have a vacancy right now in Louisiana, so maybe not for Louisiana specifically, but if you're moving, or again, if you think that might be something that you want in the future, it could make sense to at least start on a committee and then move into that government relations chair role. Building a consistent relationship with your legislator. I'll tell you in Georgia, something we've been actively advocating for is a state-sponsored need-based aid program, because we are one of 2 states in the country that has no form of any need-based aid on the state level. And so something that, again, I mentioned my colleague Ashley Young earlier, she actually put together a group of, people like educators in Georgia who are actively kind of, advocating for need-based aid and working closely with legislators. And the legislators that she, kind of selected to be a part of that coalition are legislators that they're her legislators, and she started building relationships with them just by coming to these legislative days where we were having meetings with legislators. So after like a few years of doing that, she built a relationship and kind of brought them into that overall coalition. So building a coalition is another way of kind of having another big step. Again, it might feel like, oh, who am I to do something like that? But I think it always has to start somewhere. And then finally, maybe writing a letter to an editor or an op-ed for a newspaper. And I think I'm falling right in time. So just a few closing thoughts that I wanted to share. Again, you do not have to be an expert or even have past experience in advocacy to do this work. I think you just have to have passion for it. I think it's really important to feel like an expert in college access or in student experiences and things like that. And then from there, you can use that expertise to kind of have these conversations with legislators. Remember that legislators need us. And so it's a communal relationship. oftentimes they're not, these are just people, and they're trying to, support their constituents. And so, I think you should feel empowered to have these conversations, and to know that you're not kind of bothering them, that this is part of their job and that this is something that they need. And I would encourage you, if this session was compelling to you, if you do want to stay involved in advocacy, to just think about what your next step is. So again, coming back to this screen, maybe if you do want to get involved or stay involved, picking out one thing from this screen that really kind of stands out to you as a way to kind of take your next step. All right, and that is all from me. I think I'm just 1 minute over. I did not time that, so I'm really proud of that. But I just wanted to say thank you all so much for showing up, and kind of being here for students. I really appreciate it. If you need anything, or if you're looking for a way to get involved, this screen is how you can reach me. You can see our section of the website on SACAC's website, or you can email me at govrel@sacac.org. Thank y'all so much.
All right. You unmuted? I'm not gonna do that. Yes. I don't understand why you're suddenly people. Yep, we're ahead. So, yeah, I don't understand. You're controlling the sound, because when you unmute, suddenly it comes through the speaker.
but for some reason you can't hear me, because Jade couldn't hear. Right?
I'll see if I hear.
Test. No. You've had it working. Because your headphones are in. Test. Okay. We're just waiting on word from one person. All right, so best laid plan. This is our your turn. So we had three panelists signed up for today. Unfortunately, we haven't heard from Senator Jackson, and I just got word from Dr. Lambert that she's very so we are we're standing in, and we're gonna take the steps, but we have presenting with us from Louisiana Financial.
Yeah.
We can talk with her and learn a little bit about what so we can start by telling us a little bit about what you do for yeah.
Sure. The easier question is probably what don't I do at LAWSA? I have been there since 2004. So a very long time. I am currently the Director of Public Information and Advising. And this is going to be with our new division. For those of you that are familiar with the agency, you may know that we have a division called Public Information and Communications. That division is now college access, and communications. And so I, along with my co-director, Shane Patel, lead that team. We are in charge of, kind of the marketing. If you looked at our website, notice that there's a rebrand, that would be changed for, our graphic designers. We also are responsible for disseminating information on behalf of the agency, that any of the handouts that we have, any of the reports that go out, that's going to come from us. More importantly, we handle all of the incoming and outgoing communications for LAWSA. And we also oversee, we are kind of the outward facing arm that handles, dealing with constituents, in regards to agency focus. So in about 2 weeks, we'll start processing, which is, one of our more well-known programs. And so that will fall, under our agency. We do outreach, FAFSA completion events, financial aid presentations, anything that someone requests of us. Generally, we try to make it happen. I am also the co-lead for the College Affordability Work Group. I share that task with, Elizabeth Bentley Smith with the Louisiana Board of Regents. And pretty much anything else that comes along kind of falls under my wheelhouse at that office.
But, question to you about, advocacy, cities, and how we can help. In our personal life.
There will have to be adjustments to our schedule. Typically speaking, in a normal year, when the FAFSA opens October 1, is usually when we are pretty much everywhere in the state doing FAFSA completion events. October is also Louisiana College Application and Access Month, so those really usually busy. What we are currently looking at now is what strategies we are going to implement. One of the things that we are going to be pushing for is for early FSAID completion, because that will be mandatory, before students and parents can complete the FAFSA. That will have to be, those IDs need to be set up. So we will be encouraging, our school counselors, administrators to invite us in so we can help with that process. We will be going to DC in July. They're having intern sponsoring a FAFSA train the trainer workshop where we will go and all the things, and then we'll come back, and teach all the things. So we are currently in the process of kind of, those dates are going to be mid-July. We'll be polling our counselors because several of them said that they would be interested in that training. So we'll be polling them to see what time frames work best for them, because I know it'll be kind of piggybacking with about return to school. So we'll be doing several webinars to train people that are going to also be assisting with that, just to make sure the slides are have the least of the following as possible, because there has been concern, and rightfully so, December, the short month. What happens if those dates, they haven't said what date in December, they just said December. It could be December 12th, and then they're gone. So one of the, exactly. So one of the things that we'll also do, as an agency, is have more agency events. That way, when we can get that the schools are on holiday break, they can come directly to us and get that assistance as well. And they're not, kind of stuff not happening. Yeah, they have kind of mock-up of what it looks like. It's supposed to go down to, I think, 36 questions. It's simplified, but I don't know if simplified necessarily means easier. It'll be shorter for sure. There are some other changes. They're doing away with the expected family contribution and using a student aid index now. So there will be some changes, and we do know what it looks like. They sent into and NASDAQ, they've been very proactive in kind of saying, okay, this is a draft, but this is kind of what it looks like. So, yeah, they're removing it. Yes. If
Repeat the question. Um, the question is about the, or I think that is right here, HB 219 and the removing of FAFSA.
We use the FAFSA. Students have the option to either do the FAFSA or do the top online application to apply to top. If this is the bill that was filed by Representative Owen, I believe that that bill may be getting rewritten or overruled. We had the opportunity to work with Representative Owen, and so with the FAFSA, they don't have to do the FAFSA. And so what we've done, we do the changes to make it easier for students and parents to see that you have, either you can do the FAFSA if you want to apply for federal aid, some state aid and top, or you can do the top. So what was being asked of our senior bill kind of is already being done, just because they always have. Mhm. I do not. From our perspective, from law school, we typically do not take a stance either way, on bills, but we do provide a lot of information, to assist our legislators in making whatever decisions that they want to make. What I can say is that any changes that they do make, if those are passed, those will go into, basically into the top core curriculum ultimately, which usually whenever they have changes like that, it doesn't take effect immediately. It's usually, several years down the road before it takes effect. So it'll just depend on, what they decide, but generally they do try to make sure, the top curriculum coincides with. Mhm. I believe that two of those got combined. There were two of them, and I think they may have gotten combined at some point. So yeah, it'll just depend on what passes and what comes out. We'll make those adjustments as necessary. And like I said, usually, it will be, we're looking at class of 2024. Generally, it'll be something that will take effect probably 4 years later. So it would be something that will move over time.
I think that so I won't ask you to do that, but I've had a hard time deciding for myself whether good or bad. So I think about anything that's really easier for that's right? But then I about you'll have to what do you think the effect would be on
there would still, from my understanding, this bill only talked about the FAFSA in regards to the application top. So there's still the mandate in the Department of State that requires FAFSA. So that would still be, from our stance, we are, always wanting to assist students and families and help them do what's best for their situation. And you do have some parents that do not want to do the family. And so this is why we always have that top conversation before they have that. But right now, the mandate is the fact that it's graduation. I have not heard anything. Again, we are more of a, we're not in the, on either side, kind of involved in those conversations, but not in our particular field here. Yeah. I believe the last time that there was a shortage, it was 16, 17 is when there was a shortage. And then since then, it's been filled up. We have not seen anything. The top award amounts are also legislatively controlled. So they set those award amounts and they are whatever the max top award amount was for 2016, 17. That is what they are capped at. So unless there's some sort of legislative action to increase that, they'll remain. There are ideally, if a student is Pell eligible, which in the state of Louisiana, we have many Pell eligible students. So we're a little unique in that respect. I believe for our 2022 grads, we had one of the highest percentages of Pell eligible students. And of the students that were Pell eligible, we were ranked number 6 for the amount that they received in Pell Grant funds. So generally, this is why we still do want students to complete the stuff. Because a lot of times they don't know whether and then if they're eligible for any federal aid, that's going to be 68. They've increased it to 73.95 for next year. And they can receive Pell Grants in addition to we also have the Louisiana GovRel, which is the university component and Go Grant funding. In order to be eligible for Go Grant funding, they also need to be eligible for and receive the Pell Grant. So that one is conditional, but we also have the students that are in wildlife and fishing. We have Chafee is federally funded, but we do administer service. So one of the questions on the FAFSA does have to be the cost. So that's another source of funding. More recently, they have done a push for students that may be which, this was something that came about instead of COVID, and it will end this year, but we have to make a push for that. Some other state agencies to assist those people that may need that support in those wraparound there, because we do recognize that it's not just academic support in other areas. So coupled with federal aid, state aid, we're talking about outside of our agency, and then also advising students to take advantage of the literature and that what financial aid what are those application deadlines, and then also looking at right? Because before you step foot onto a college campus, if you've applied to multiple colleges or something, you have a choice, and making the choice that is best for you and that is best for you financially. strength. All students are not created equally. Some students are so we try to educate and guide students and parents to make the right choices. Because having that available aid is one part of it. But the other part is making educated and informed decisions to make sure that when you graduate, you have a least amount of debt. And part of that part is making the right decision. Yeah. Our priority deadline, and again, this is what makes Louisiana, we have, we usually tell students overall, July 1. If you're going to be, for example, 2023 grads, if you're graduating in May and you know the fall, get July 1 to make sure your FAFSA is done so that your aid is hopefully in place by the time fall starts. The priority deadline for us is February 1. So again, a late FAFSA release is condensing that window that we have to try to encourage students and parents to get the FAFSA completed. Part of the reason that we asked for the FAFSA to be completed so early is because students can submit a FAFSA, and that will satisfy graduation requirements if they just forget. But in order to receive aid, in order to be processed for top eligibility, the FAFSA has to be complete. So that means it has to be signed. There can't be any errors. And so we see that a good number of students submit and it's not complete. And so we're like, okay, get it done. And that way it's submitted. If there are issues that need to be addressed, we can help you work on that so that by the time summer comes, you can try to avoid that summer melt phenomenon where, oh my God, I got selected for verification. The financial aid office is asking for like 10 documents in order for me to get aid. I don't have it. It's too much. I can't tell it in. Now I'm not going to do that. So February 1 is ideally what we asked for. And so we do recognize that will be a challenge with the FAFSA projected to roll. Mhm. Yeah. Right. 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 Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah. We are, if we don't do it, we can't do it. Is generally what I say. We do financial literacy, presentations. We do financial aid presentations. And that, it's free for state agencies, so it's at no cost. If there's something that you need us to come in and do, we can do it. We do it mostly at a high school level, but we are, we do kind of professional development training pretty much year round, pretty much everywhere. Some of the institutions we had to meet with on our acceptance process, because we've had some post-secondary institutions that may have misadvised students about, how many hours you need to take the class. And so if it kind of happens repeatedly, it's like, okay, let's come to the table and let's sit and discuss the process for acceptance so that you know how to advise students that come to you. One of the things that we are currently in the process of doing is kind of restructuring the agency. We are adding comprehensive advising officers to the staff that we currently have. And so the role of these individuals, and we actually do this, is if a student contacts us and they say, I have no idea what I'm doing, we will sit with them and make sure they know what steps to take and what needs to happen. And sometimes the student comes in 12th grade and just says, hey, I need this and this, and they're on their way. Sometimes the student and parents will come to us and and they need extensive handhold. And so recognizing that there is that need for students and parents to be educated on making the correct decisions where financial aid is concerned, we have with the comprehensive advising officer, that would be their role. Basically, it doesn't matter where the student is, they can reach out to us and we will help them with those decisions and help them and, hey, what college are you going to, what aid are you being offered? Let us see your award letter and helping them understand what their choices are and what this means for them. Because a lot of times they don't understand what this means. And to your point, students that may be first year or low income, that is a detriment for them if they are unable to really look at the full picture. And there's been some discussion about that, that post-secondary institution, how can we show students what your next cost is going to be? Don't include loans in that because loans have to be paid back. So, this is not the price. Take those loans out. You got scholarships, you got grants. This is the bottom line that you're looking at having to pay out the house. And a lot of times, if it's not framed properly, students don't understand what they're getting into. They don't understand that if you take out these loans can be either good or they can be bad. I've been with law for many, many, many years. The beginning of those years was when we still had the division, which we no longer have. But I have seen everything. And when it comes to loans going into default, that is somewhere that you don't want to be. When you look at $120,000 worth of student loans, and then depending on what field they're going in, what's the average salary going to be? And if you have $120,000 worth of loans, what is your monthly payment going to be? And your salary is like, right now, we're in the process of trying to develop a tool as well that will make those calculations for those students. That this school you're going to, this and then you got Pell Grant, okay, we're gonna take that out. You got okay, we're gonna take that out. What about, indirect costs, living off campus, but basically a way to kind of help them so that when they go to that site and they say, okay, these are all the things that I'm looking at. This is how much I'm looking at out of pocket for each of these students to help make that decision, so that we don't have students $120,000. And we usually tell them student loans are an incentive. Use them wisely. And you don't have to take everything that they're offering you. Sometimes it can be overwhelming and saying, hey, I need this. And they may not even know that they can say, hey, I don't need all this money. I only need this much to cover these costs and this much, for, room and board or whatever, and send the rest back. And if they don't know that, it makes it easy to end up in a position where you have $120,000 wrong. So, she's also probably gonna need some counseling at some point for how to handle that. When you graduate, what happens? If you're with a regular lender, there's a 60 or 10-year repayment rate, so she wants to look at consolidating, to extend her repayment, depending on employment. They want to see if she's with an employer where when she starts making those payments, if they're in the public loan forgiveness program, so she can get some of that forgiven. But once we are done here, I will give you my information, and get with you so you can take some next steps to make sure the individuals at your institution have access to us, and we can help in whatever way. I know sometimes it's overwhelming for financial aid officers as well. So certainly I want to talk to you.
So I know, on the college side, you just referenced financial aid officers, and quite often there, on the high school side, you might not have any different, a lot of the work that how do I say something? What type
That is where we have our, every year we do two sets of professional development opportunities for counselors. One of them is our, just kind of a general counsel webinar, or professional counsel webinar, kind of where we, go over the counsel. We go over loss of children, we go over federal aid. And then at any point in time, we have a pretty good relationship with our counselors. Rhonda Ritterbo is our liaison for our counselors. So anytime, if anyone in here where there is a counselor, if you get an email, it's probably coming from Rhonda. But we try to basically provide any information that the counselors need to give. That's not possible. They can always, the role that I was mentioning a few minutes ago, the comprehensive one of the things that will do is that if we have a state agency that has provided that everybody in the state has access, that means that if you have a great counselor, you may not need one. If you have a counselor that may be overwhelmed or may not know, we're here as a resource to kind of supplement and fill in there. And so that kind of makes the process a little, it's kind of like this. But if there's ever something the counselor needs, we are ready for it. We have spoken, they've invited us to, we are at the particular that we've been on a call, giving a counselor update, and so just like with the FAFSA, we need the better FAFSA, with the better simple FAFSA. That's also an opportunity where we are going to take a discussion at our processing webinars. We specifically ask them, hey, we're going to do this. Would you be interested in sharing this information with you come up to help you? There's a lot of counselors on the ground helping your students keep them back. We're on the state going back to complete. They need to know how to fill out the FAFSA. That's one of the things that I'm sure is going to be you're going to put that over the years. Students are filling out the application and they have some questions out here. how do we feel about the board, you know, and we got to this question, and we don't. And in that case, this is how we talk about it. Typically for council, I would say that we need to get rid of. I would probably say, and I think I referenced it earlier in the conversation, is that there has been a push to encourage colleges to be more transparent about, how much does your college cost. So what you'll see now is that a lot of colleges actually have college cost estimators. So that's one resource that's immediately available for those students. So, okay, this is. Even if you work at a particular institution and you may not be familiar with all federal institutions, at the least know your school that okay, this is what you have to do. And if all you have a because we can provide those okay, this is moving or you're considering so yeah, we told you this and then we can you know, looking at your academic profile, you know, when you do the process, other things that you need to do. And what we smart in the fall, I know that physician students there's more than enough work to do. So I would say that comprehensive that can offer that I have a question for everyone else. So as we bring back what what would you like for you by that I mean what you like and then we'll ask you for help, right?
Oh, you- Right now, we're not. Yeah. $10. As we learn more, we'll figure that out. So, hopefully. And that's there for, okay.
Thank you for coming.